It's your boy AG Cornerman Boxing. What's going on, y'all? I just wanted to give a quick recap on last night's championship bout between Xander Zayas, Jorge Garcia. It was at the Madison Square Garden Hulu Theater, or the theater now known as. And it was a good night. A lot of Puerto Ricans, a lot of Dominicans. The city came out. It was a lot of Latinos, a lot of Mexicans. Brownsville, Brooklyn came out for Shoo Shoo. It was a good night, good atmosphere. We see the fans starting to show up more and more. They're real passionate right now. You saw the Puerto Rican fan base, they dying for another superstar, and they was happy with what they saw from Xander. Let me just jump right into that. Xander Zayas won a unanimous decision over Jorge Garcia over 12 rounds for the vacant WBO junior middleweight title. Final scorecards were 116 to 112, 118 to 110, and 118 to 110, all in favor of Xander Zayas, who becomes the junior middleweight world champion for the WBO. Now, this was a good fight. Xander came ready. As we know, Jorge Garcia, he's proven to be a tough outing. He beat Charles Conwell, but Xander said it, before the fight. Conwell fought him one way. He put pressure all 12 rounds. He was kind of right there for Garcia to find him, where Xander, he did the opposite. He boxed him. He was rolling under a lot of them shots. He was moving, pivoting, getting out. He had him missing punches. He really frustrated Garcia, who is a tough fighter. I'm sure he'll be back. I'm sure he'll get some more good wins down the stretch. But Xander kind of laid out a blueprint how to beat those kind of fighters. He just kept making them miss. He couldn't catch him. It was like he in there fighting a ghost, to be honest. He did land some shots. Shout out to Garcia. He slowed him down a little bit, landed some good body shots, but Xander came in on point. He was ready to seize the moment. They matched him up well. It was the right time to take this kind of fight, which I believe could help him prepare for Sebastian Fundora. That's also a tall, rangy Mexican fighter that likes to apply pressure, but Fundora could box a little more than what we saw from Garcia. He got a little more in his arsenal, so I mean that's a fight right there. Xander and Fundora, that's crazy. Then you got Virgil Ortiz. Everybody want to hype up the Mexican Puerto Rico clash. Those are some heck of opportunities right there. You can go to Vegas or New York with that one, cause that'll sell well. But shout out to Xander Zayas. I believe he gave himself a B plus on his performance. Listening to the post-fight press conference, and I think that's fair. I mean, he could get like an A for me. Considering his big stage, he's fighting in front of his home crowd, a lot of pressure, and he executed the game plan. You got to judge it off that. He executed. He had a game plan. He used the science. Shout out to Coach Javier Centeno, who made sure his fighter was ready for the biggest moment of their career. That's Centeno's first world champion from the ground up. That's something to really take pride of. He didn't just get him when Xander was made. He brought him up into the pro rankings. I'm sure they go back even before that, but we got to confirm that. I don't want to just speculate, but I'm pretty sure the relationship's been there for a long time, and Centeno brought him up from a baby. Xander signed 16 years old with Top Rank, and now he's a world champion. Shout out to Bob Arum, to the whole Top Rank, because they know how to build champions. And I think that's one of the reasons why we see Fernando Vargas signed his sons with Top Rank. Now we move on to the co-main event. You had Bruce Shushu Carrington versus Mateus Hayter, right? Let me make sure this. We got, so the final score, that's for the vacant WBC interim featherweight title. So this puts you right in line for that world title, which Stephen Fulton has, and the champion in Reese's, Ray Vargas. So those are the two guys kind of in Shushu's way right now as far as the WBC goes. You got the other champions, Espinoza. You got Nick Ball, and who's the other guy? They got another champion, man. That division is pretty stacked. So yeah, we'll see what happens with that. But as far as Shushu, congratulations. He fought in front of his home crowd, a strong, tough guy. We didn't know too much about him because I believe he never fought outside of Africa. He was representing Namibia. Shout out to them in Namibia. That's a success on a story on his own, coming from Namibia, a country that I personally don't know too much about when it comes to boxing. I gotta go look at the history, but they brought a guy, from Namibia all the way to Madison Square Garden, and he fought for the belt, for the interim belt, which is, shout out to them. That's a success story in as well. But let's get to the scorecards. 119 to 109, 119, 109, two times. 120 to 108. You know, he pitched a unanimous decision shutout. So shout out to Bruce Carrington. You know, I know he wanted to hurt the guy, he wanted to drop him, but you know that wasn't the case. You know, he wasn't able to do so. But you know, he still won mostly almost every round. You know, two judges had him losing only one round, so it was damn near a shutout. You know, shout out to him. You know, I'm sure you always want to do better in front of your home crowd. You want to like wow them and make them off their seat, make them get off their seat and get those knockdowns. But you know, it's not always possible. You can't knock everybody out. You know what I mean? The guy was strong. He came prepared, ready. He had a little awkward style because he did have that little, you know, like kind of European, like, you know, boxing ability, but at the same time, he was strong. So, you know, shout out to him. The guy came, he was game, you know what I mean? We'll see what's next for Shushu. Like I said, there's some tough champions in that weight class. And we saw him at the end of the fight. He called out Espinoza and all. Man, Espinoza's a tough fight, man. I think that he should be looking at him last. But, yeah, man, that shout out to them. It was a good fight. You know, part of the music in the background, man. We got a freaking parade outside my neighborhood in Queens, so you know, shout out to the parade too. Latinos having fun. It's a Colombian parade, you know, they bugging. But yeah, let me pause this video for a little bit because I don't want to distract y'all with all that noise. All right, y'all. So that card's out the way. So now we move on. You know, we touched up on Shushu. You know, shout out to him. We gonna see what's next for him. How Top Rank gonna line him up. You know, he's building up a nice buzz. You know, people seem to really like him. You know, he's a good guy. He comes from a good family. You know, he's out in Vegas now, but you know what I mean. We'll see what's up. Shout out to him and Coach K. Those are good people. You know, that's people always gonna root for you when you have a good heart and you carry yourself with humility. So it's nice to see him have some of that. We expect to see more of that. So interesting to see where Shusha goes from here, and if he does take that leap for the world title shot next. Moving on, we had Emiliano Fernando Vargas, the legendary Fernando Vargas' son, who took on Alexander Espinoza, you know, the fighter from Ecuador, another guy we don't know too much about, but you know, he made it to the big stage. Shout out to him. No, this was for the junior NABF junior welterweight title. And Vargas, he kind of stole the night because he had that knockout that everybody wanted to see. You know, he came in one round and he got the guy out of there. Counter pull. They said they took that game from Floyd, watching Floyd. Shout out to Mayweather. You know, I see a lot of young fighters trying to emulate what he does in the ring, which, you know, is smart. He's one of the greatest. But, yeah, shout out to Emiliano. You know, he got the stoppage. Man, this music is killing me, man. Hold on, give me 1 second, y'all. Man, we just gonna have to rock with this music in the background. I'm sorry, man. This parade is loud. I can't do nothing about it. It's just bad timing. But yeah. So yeah, shout out to Vargas. You know, they came to New York City, moving like the people's champ. You know, he took his time for everybody. He took pictures with everybody. Did interviews with everybody. His father, you know, came real humble. The whole family, tight knit group. You know, shout out to them. They're really likable people, and like I mentioned earlier, when you're nice and you're humble, people gonna get behind you, man, because it's easy to root for somebody that's doing the right thing. So, shout out to them. You know what I'm saying? We ain't get to see too much was in his toolbox because he got the guy out of there in like 8 seconds. But you know, that's what the fans want. They're not trying to be there all night. They want to go party. So, you know, you did the fans a favor. You got them out of there. You went out into the crowd, took pictures, and that's what the fans like. So. Shout out to him. He had, you know, that's an A+, right? You got him out of there in 8 seconds. What more do you want? Like the great Roberto Duran says, a little gem, you know. You're going to get paid the same whether you get him out in 1 round or in 10 rounds. So you might as well make that fast money in 1 round. You know what I'm saying? You got paid for 1 round. Well, you know, aside from all the camp and all that. But, yeah. Next, we move on. Rohan Polanco versus Quentin Randall for the WBO Intercontinental welterweight title, which Rohan was defending. You know, the final scorecards were 97-93, 100-90, and 99-91. So Rohan Polanco pretty much dominated. He was in there with a tough fighter who went the distance, 10 rounds with Brian Norman. You know, he had some good victories under his belt. He beat Janelson Boca Chica, tough fighter from Detroit. So Quentin Randall, he was a game opponent, you know. And Rohan, even though Rohan couldn't stop him, he did hurt him, and he won most of the rounds on the judges' scorecard. So good performance. You know, he had a big Dominican crowd in there. You know, we love to see that. Shout out to them. You know, they definitely came out for their guy, and he held it down. You know, that was a good stepping stone. Boxing is like anything else. There's levels, so you keep climbing them levels. You keep taking another step up, and you know that's what they are. They're steps up to that, you know, that highest plateau, that world championship. So he's on the right path. He's got the top ranked team behind him. He got a good coaching team with him. So you know, shout out to Joan Guzman. I believe I seen him in that corner. You know, he walked out with him. So shout out to them. Congratulations, and we'll see what's next for the Dominican fighter in the welterweight division, which, you know, hopefully could bring back some spark to that weight class because it's not really like as big as it was when you had the Mayweathers, the Pacquiao. So we'll see what happens going forward with that. Next we move on. Juanmita Lopez, who fought Jorge Gonzalez Sanchez in the Puerto Rican battle. You know, them guys got a little heated at the face-off. You know, it was anticipating the good energy, and Juanmita handled his business, man. To me, he might have had the performance of the night. He took him out in 2 rounds, stopped him in 2 rounds after dropping him like 2 or 3 times. Juanmita looked good, man, and he got that attitude. Like, he really representing Puerto Rico. Like, you know what I mean? He coming to run things over. You know, I know it was only a 4-rounder, but shoot, you got him out of there in less than 4 rounds. That's a big, you know what I mean? That's telling, you know. We'll see. We'll see what happens next. It was a good performance. I think he, you know, I believe he's a former Olympian. He got the skills. He got the right attitude. He got his father. He comes from the lineage. He got that championship lineage, Juanma Lopez, you know what I'm saying? So we expect some big things from Juanmita, who will be fighting under Xander's cards, I believe, going forward, building up that Puerto Rican fan base. And, you know, they're going to bring some success back to the island. I'm pretty sure that Juanmita looks like he going to be all right. I could see him winning the title or something in the future. There's some very promising, like, when you look at the up-and-coming prospects, he has some very promising things going on. So I really want to see how that career plays out. And I think he'll do just fine. I think there's a bright, very, very bright future for him. Shout out to his mother who was ringside. She couldn't even watch the fight, man. She was praying. She on the phone texting people. She couldn't watch the fight, man. I told her after the first round, I said, Miss, it's going to be over soon. Don't worry too much. Like, your son, it's about to be over. I saw in the first round what he was doing, and he dropped him, I think, twice. So I'm like, yeah, it's not going to last too much longer. Juanmita got some killer instinct. He got a little attitude, and we saw that last night. I really appreciated his performance. Shout out to Juanmita Lopez. Big talent on last night's card. And he might have one of the highest grades on my grade sheet for last night. You know, I try to be grade a little tough because you got to grade them on the professional championship level. You know, this ain't the amateurs. This ain't elite amateur boxing. This is professional prize fighting. So you got to grade them, you know, with high standards. You don't want to baby them too much. It's not the amateurs. No more room for errors. You know, you can make errors in the amateurs. That's where you can, you know, grow as a fighter. In the pros, you grow as well. Of course, like I said, it's levels. Every step up. But yeah, we try to be a little more tough. So y'all understand my criteria going forward. Like, you know, you really got to earn them good grades. Like, we really looking for skills, ring generalship, aggression, attitude, all the things, you know, that determine a good fighter. So, and what the fans want to see. So, Juanmita, he turned it up. Next, we got Yan Santana, Dominican fighter, signed a split T, who was for Aaron Alamada. You know, it was a 10-round bout. Yan went the distance. You know, he had also a Dominican crowd with him, you know. He won every round, 100-90. On all the judges' scorecards, he pitched a shutout. I mean, what more can you say to that? You know, I'm sure people wanted to see a knockout. They want to see somebody get hurt. Unfortunately, it is the hurt business. But, you know, he did what he had to do. He won the bout, you know. He got himself a vacant NABO featherweight title. So it's a step forward. I think those kind of bouts are necessary going the distance. You really get to show what you got in your toolbox, and you can go back, look, and see what you really need to work on. You know, you grade your performance. You have more room to grade. You know what I mean? 10 rounds. Not a lot of people can go 10 rounds. So, you know, shout out to him. He did what he had to do. I thought we could have seen him maybe hurt the guy a little more, but That's easier said than done. You know, he's coming into the game. He's 15-0 now with 12 knockouts. So you know, I'm sure he'll go back and work on what he got to work on. And I do expect him to get better. You know, going forward, them type of fights help you grow if you break them down correctly and fix your mistakes. You know what I mean? Or perfect your craft even more. You can't be complacent and be like, oh yeah, I won every round, and just think that's gonna get you through. Because as the levels go higher, you will come across some stiff competition, and you're gonna have to dig in that toolbox and make adjustments on the fly. Like as we mentioned before, there's no room for error. So there that goes. As far as what could be next for him, he was calling out Shushu in the press conference. I loved his attitude, but you know, we'll see. Time will tell. You know, he got a promising future. We'll see what happens going forward with him. Next, we have Steven Navarro versus Christopher Rio. This was a good fight, man. I enjoyed this fight. It was very competitive. Steven Navarro, we've seen him before from Inglewood, California. He got a lot of skills in his toolbox. He looked good. He usually looks good. He get 6-0, 5 knockouts. He usually gets them out of there. He was in there with a tough guy, Christopher Rios from Compton, California. You know, they was banging. Steven Navarro was using his fast combinations, ring generalship, but Christopher Rios just kept coming, man. He was a man possessed. He kept coming like a dog. His team kept urging him, pressuring him. You know, throw you, let your hands go. He was doing just that, punching with bad intentions, going to the body. He had a lot of success, but he won a few rounds. You know, this fight came down to the last round. The judges scored it 77-75, all three. So one round was the difference, and it was that last round, which all three gave it to Navarro. Had that flipped another way, it would have been a split, or it could have went the other way. You know, that's how close this fight was and competitive. So shout out to both guys. You know, I think that was a great test for Navarro. Very good test. You know, once he starts reaching that championship level in the bantamweight division, Christopher Rios, I'd love to see him again. I'd love to see him again. This could only be good for his confidence, knowing that he was in there against the A side, a tough, skilled fighter, and you gave him HELL. You know what I mean? You gave him that. So shout out to him. You know, I'd love to see both of those guys come back in the ring soon. And then finally, the opener last night, Julius Barlow making his pro debut. He has a great track record, elite amateur, multi-time national champion. Who fought Brandon Ayala, undefeated fighter. He was 2-0 from North Carolina. And, you know, it was a good scrap. Barlow won every round, 40-36 on all the cards. Unanimous decision. He had a big crowd from him, all from San Diego. They all came. They had good ringside seats. It was a lot of them. You know, he brought the crowd. It's good to see him have that support early in his career for his pro debut, and they was making noise. They came out. So shout out to Team Barlow. They supporting their guy, and he has the makings. You know, he got the following. He could fight. You know, he seems like a well-spoken kid, good kid. So. I think he got a promising future as well. In the lightweight division, that division is stacked, but I believe he'll be all right. I think he got time to grow, develop. That was a good test for him starting off, you know. He got an undefeated skull on his resume, so yeah, man, we'll see. You know, it was a good night. Top ranked last show on ESPN, but we'll see for now, because, you know, they got history. They worked before in the past, before I was even born. So yeah, you know, I think Top Rank they'll get on some good streaming deals, and you know they're gonna keep coming back to New York. I think it'll play out. You know, they got a great team, a bunch of Hall of Famers over there, the matchmakers, the president Bob Arum. You know what I mean? They just got matchmakers and experience, and Bob Arum got all the connects. So I think he'll be just fine. You know what I'm saying? And yeah, that's it, y'all. That wraps it up. It was a good night of boxing. We'd love to see the fans come out the way they did, and hopefully we keep getting more of that. So shout out to ESPN Top Rank. Thank you for all the memories. Shout out to the whole Top Rank crew, the whole ESPN crew, and most importantly, shout out to y'all, the fans, because y'all make it exciting. Y'all are what packs out the arenas and makes the noise and build up that anticipation that we need, that fighters thrive off, you know what I mean, that everybody loves, you know. So the sport wouldn't be nothing without the fans, and, you know, shout out to y'all, most importantly, all my supporters, everybody that tunes in. I love y'all, you know what I mean. Without y'all, we wouldn't be nothing. The media, the fighters, none of us. So shout out to y'all, and I might do this more often. You know, give y'all a little recap and grade the fights, and yeah, give y'all some of my insight, little by little. We'll get to that, but yeah, we're gonna start off here. I'm gonna let y'all go because it's been already 20 minutes of me talking. I hope y'all enjoyed it, and catch y'all on the next one, man. Thank y'all and God bless as always. Peace and love.